So as the year is wrapping up, and before we really even get to the best albums of the 2024 list, there are some albums that didn't make it to the list, but are definitely still worth a shout out. While they weren't the greatest records of the year, there are still albums that I think some people might personally find it be better than the albums that I might place in the best albums of the year list. And this video kind of serves as that list for you guys, that list for those extra albums that you want, even after watching the future video that I will post. Then this is your go-to list. So the first album that I have on my list is Sol Maria by Eladio Carrion. This album is basically more of a conceptual record that focuses and entails more on Eladio's mom. I think his mom who passed away, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of a nice, heartfelt tribute to her. While narratively it does kind of stray away from its main points, I think for the most part it's a very enjoyable record. It's not like his other records where it kind of had a personal issue where it's like way too long and it was like too many songs in that record than it needed to be, or there's just too many unnecessary like filler songs. Less filler, it is much more straight to the point, which I really enjoyed and admired from Eladio, and it shows that he wants to, I guess, for the most part, carry out this project the most concise way he can possibly carry it out. And next up I have Timeless by KAYTRANDA. This album, for the most part, is a pretty fun and nice and enjoyable sort of dance and I don't. Is it kind of like dance pop? It sort of is dance pop, but it's mostly just like house music in general. I think KAYTRANDA's like just mood and vibe just really shifts, and for this album, it seems like much more like nocturnal. Like there's a lot of songs you can just kind of play in the night. I mean, which by KAYTRANDA and Childish Gambino was really one of the highlights of the record. It just kind of like showcases very nice, fun, and just don't take it too seriously. Just be there for the vibe type of mood that this album really reflects on. There were some certain points throughout this record where I feel like some songs were a bit unnecessary, but for the most part, this album can really be a fun and enjoyable ride if you just kind of like shut that off your brain and just kind of focus in on the vibes. Next up, I have johaLYN by Lyn Inauzumi. This album really surprised me. So for those who don't know, Lyn is the main singer for the Persona 5 soundtrack, and I was surprised that she was gonna come out with a personal record of hers. This album was actually pretty nice and coherent for most part. Sure, there were some points where it could have been better. There was like a switch up, or it just had a bit more movement. But the feeling that I get from this record is that almost everything felt like live and on the spot, and it's almost like this record was supposed to be played like during live, like sets or areas, or maybe like a cafe setting, just because of how jazzy and how just mellow and chilled this record sounds throughout. This is definitely, I think this is her first project so far, her debut album, so she has a lot of room to grow, even despite her singing her ass off and having so many bangers in a Persona 5 soundtrack. But it shows that she's willing to evolve and even mature past that incredible feature with the soundtrack and just kind of delve into more personal space. Next up, I have Why Always Me by Cochise. Hopefully I pronounced that name correctly. But yeah, I think this album is just very energetic from front to back. It's just more of the same thing you would kind of hear from him. It's very just rage type. If you're not into his, if you haven't like listened to his music, he's just more into fitting into the rage genre. You probably might have heard some song of his in TikTok because he has so many songs that were just viral during the pandemic when he first dropped those songs. But yeah, I think this album for the most part is just some nice sugary fun. It's just some, again, music that you can just listen to, turn your head off, just bop your head off. And I think tracks like Google Me, in I think 4 a.m. I think just one called 4 a.m. 4 or something, if I'm not mistaken. These are short, but just very like just bouncy and nice tracks where it's just like a bunch of, it's like a rush of sugar flowing through your veins. I don't know why, but it's like the best way I can just like describe this album. This is very sugary. It's very in your face, and it's almost like a child with ADHD that's just like rickety and just like everywhere and you can't control them. You're like, you know what, screw it, why not? It feels that way. Next up, I have What Now by Brittany Howard. This record was really powerful, and you could tell that Brittany just wanted to just convey so many emotions with this record. And I think it's R&B slash sort of pop at times. There are some sort of pop infusions here and there, but it's mainly for the most part R&B. I think her voice in here is just so damn good. There's a lot of parts in here where there's like a reverb, and a lot of space, like the spacious production put into her voice, and I think it really serves like her voice very well. But I think for the most part, she's just kind of like just doing what she's used to, into a more modern setting, if anything. I don't know why, but it's just like the production feels a bit more refined and a bit more like, I guess, more in touch with the modern sound, if that makes any sense, while also preserving her sort of vintage and old school vocals and vibes you might know of her from the past. It has this very perfect and healthy balance that I feel that is very needed in the R&B landscape, and I think she's one of the few voices who can carry out such a transition so well. So next up, I have Cowboy Carter by Beyonce. After releasing such a huge, just like party discotheque type of vibe of a record, I was very interested into the approaches she was going to have with her next record, since she's kind of planning out a whole trilogy. And she just decided to go to country, kind of go back more into the roots, since she's from Texas, kind of pay homage to that type of music. And I think she did a pretty solid job with this record. Sure, I don't personally love it as much as I do love Renaissance, but it's a nice departure. And despite the length kind of seeming a bit long and chaotic for people who want to get into this record, I think you should just kind of like look past that and just give this album a listen, because there are a lot of songs in here that are actually very nice and refined. 16 Carriage is actually a very nice song in general. It was a gorgeous song, honestly. And there's a lot of moments in here where it's like you can tell that she's pouring her heart, and she doesn't want to mess this sort of like just homage to country music, and it just really means the world for her to make this album work, and for the most part it does work. Next up I have Sayonara by Alvaro Diaz. This album is so many things. Like, it's reggaeton, it's pop, it's kind of like electronic, it has R&B, it has some trap, it's a lot of things, and it really shows the nature Alvaro has when it comes to making music. I think his previous record, which I forgot the name, I don't know how, it was similar to that. I think this is supposed to be like a sequel record, since it's like 3 years apart, and it kind of has almost the same themes, but just the vibes in general, it's just very like roller coaster type. It reminds me a bit of Astro World, with how like just like a carnival ride it was, and it was like there's so many layers put into it and so much effort put into it. This record kind of gives me all the same vibes. Like there's just like the first half of it is like very like electronic, experimental, has some reggaeton cuts, has some electronic cuts, has some fusion bits with it. And the second half has some more mellow and chill R&B cuts, and kind of forming in with some more trap songs, if anything. And I don't know, like in general, it feels like a celebration of his passion of his craft, and I can't help but feel proud of him for putting out a record like this. Yeah, it's a bit more on the lengthier side, but I think you'll definitely come out of this record with some bops and some banger. Next up, I have Bright Future by Adrianne Lenker. This record really hit close to home. I think like even like the first track in this album kind of made me emotional. It was kind of like just sort of this reflective, meditative state where she's kind of looking back at her past issues, her past flaws, kind of the, I guess, things that have like left a stain or have left something positive in her life, kind of examining that, reevaluating that, and again, just sort of like meditating and just looking back at those events, kind of like analyzing them in sort of a different perspective. And I don't know. I mean, for a folk album, like that's like a heavy topic, since most of folk music, at least from what I've heard, is very like just nice in the ears. Just like lyrically speaking, it's much more soothing. But I think this album like takes such a dark theme as like loss and grievances and like breakups, relationship, friendships, whatever you want to call it or label it. And it takes a lot of like hard like topics, and for some reason, it kind of makes it in a way that it's like very humane, and it's very down to earth with the listener without it seeming way too complicated for them to follow, if anything. And I feel that that's just something that Adrianne can just like capture so perfectly, and I think with aside of her collaborations with Big Thief, which was proof that she just not only has a nice voice but has just writing skills, which is one of the best writers in the genre. I don't know, it shows more of a maturity in her way of just like unfolding and unveiling these very personal things and personal events when it comes to just like exposing it on paper or exposing it on her music and your craft in general. But yeah, those are basically the albums that I have. It's a very short list, but it's more of like just like a warm-up thing before I get to the best albums of the year, which will be a much longer list and it'll be a much more complicated video to edit. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of this video. What are your honorable mentions for this year? What are the albums that didn't personally make it to the best albums of the year list for you guys, but are still worth a shout out? Let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe, turn the notification bell on so you miss an upload from me. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.